All right. Welcome, one and all the multitudes. Kasha myself. דיבר לכל הצדיקים האמיתיים שבדורנו, כל הצדיקים האמיתיים שוכני עפר קדוש ומה שבארץ הם ונפל רבינו הקדוש, מנחם בן פייגה, and of course to Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson ben Naftali Yahrtzeit, the great Talmud Rabbeinu, his Yahrtzeit tonight. So obviously we will devote tonight's shir Bezat Hashem, to Reb Nosson. We're going to talk a lot about him, and first and foremost, we're talking about the quintessential Rebbe, the quintessential tzaddik, with the quintessential Talmud student. And we have found this kind of pairing twice, 3 times before. We found it with Moshe and Yeshua. We found it with Arizal and Chaim Vital. And we found it with Rabbeinu and Reb Nosson. So it behooves us to speak of this great Talmud of Rabbeinu. First of all, to know who he was. Reb Nosson was Godel Shebagdolim. He was one of the great tzaddikim of his generation, which included Reb Levi from Berdichev, and the Baal Tanya, and Reb Zusha from Anipoli. And when he was a child, he was a child prodigy from very early age. Everybody knew who he was, and he was famous in the region where he lived. And he was taken as the son-in-law of the great Reb Dovid Tzvi of Moilov, who was a chief rabbi of 60 provinces. And it was a huge tzaddik. Reb Nosson says that until he came to Rabbeinu, he had no inkling how, with what was Moshe Rabbeinu greater than his father-in-law. How can it be? What else can you do? How can you be any greater than that? And from all the possible son-in-laws, prospective son-in-laws, David Tzvi of Moilov, he took Reb Nosson to be his son-in-law. And Reb Nosson was sitting and he was learning. His wife was the daughter of the grand rabbi of practically the entire country. And he was sitting by his His father was well-to-do, and he was just sitting and learning. That's he was living basically a cushy life, you can say. He was just learning, day in and day out. That's it. There's nothing else. Um, and um, but he was not satisfied. He was unsatisfied. He was not happy. He felt that something was missing, and his heart was burning. So he got close to the tzaddikim of his generation. Nosson was came close to Abzusha from Anipoli. He knew him, the famous brother of the Rebbe of Lemelech of Zhensk, and he actually was a Talmud. He was a student of Rebbe Levi took from Erditchev, Kedushas Levi, famous Kedushas Levi. That Rabbeinu himself called him, the Pe'er Ador, the glory of the generation. And Reb Nosson was one of his favorite Talmidim. He the story that once they traveled in a wagon. Those days, they traveled by wagons, and horsepower were literally horsepower, right? So the wagon was driving up a mountainside. Right next to it, there was a lake. So when the wagon itself is being pulled by horses and it goes up, and the wagon was loaded, there was the Sharov and the Talmidim, whatever it is, so it was going very slowly. So Nosson was sitting outside. I mean, he was very young then. He jumped off the wagon, took a dip in the lake, a mikveh, and jumped back on the wagon. So the Berditchev says, "That's it. I got him. I found him out. Now I know who he is." Nosson was he had this, you can see anybody who has ever been in the business world in one way or another, there are always articles of 5 things or 10 things or 3 habits of successful people, and all the also rans and has-beens or never will be read those articles and says, maybe I can take something from that and now I'll be successful. Basically there's one thing that successful people have that other people don't. Everything else is a result of that one attribute. And that's the whole difference between wealthy people, people that are well off, and millionaires and billionaires and zillionaires. The difference between the success level of the people is one thing the successful people have is they want it more than you do. That's it. Everything else is a result of that basic attribute. They want it. They want it so much that everything else pales by comparison. Everything falls by the wayside. Everything else is immaterial. So you got yourself, this zrizas, the quickness, the single focused, the Seder Yom, the not wasting a minute. Everything is the result of the fact that you want it. You have a tunnel vision. That's all you see. Rabbi Nosson was into Avodas Hashem. That's it. Nothing else mattered. And when he was the Talmid of Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev, he wrote the Torah of the Berditchev, and some, like he later wrote Torah of Rabbeinu, and some of Rabbi Nosson writings actually appear in the Sefer Kedushas Levi. As he recorded those Torahs that the Berditchev. And he said, he himself told this particular story, that it was one very famous story about the one Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos, the close Talmidim of the Berditchev, you would get together, they would sit, and they would speak of the greatness of the tzaddik, the Malka, and what they would do, being that they didn't have money, or much money, and what they would do is that they would go to the local baker and get from him some bagels, some whatever stuff that he couldn't sell on Friday. Take from that and to bring to the Suda and wash and love Malka and be mischazik, she was chaver. And Reb Nosson felt that something is missing. He's still missing something. And so they sent him to go buy bagels from the baker. And he was so broken. He was so filled with bitterness of what's going to be with me. Instead of going to the baker, he went to the shul, and he went to the Ezras Nosson, and he started saying Tehillim. And he was crying and was saying Tehillim, was crying, and he cried and Tehillim and cried until he fell asleep. Fell asleep in the Ezras Nosson, I don't know, on the floor or whatever it is, he fell asleep. And he said that in his sleep he saw a dream. And in this dream, he saw a ladder. That the feet of the ladder were on the earth, and the head of the ladder was all the way up to Shamayim. It's not the dream of Yaakov Avinu, that's the dream of Nosson of Breslov. And Yaakov Avinu saw angels of Hashem going up and down, but Nosson in his dream saw himself going up the ladder. And he was going a few steps in the ladder and he fell down. So he started again, and he went up and up and up and up, and he reached high, and he fell down again. So, he was, okay, now he's really going to do it. And he went up, and in his dream, he goes up and up and up, and he almost goes all the way up. And then all the way down, he falls down, and he is on the ground, and he's broken. And he can't move. That's it. Suddenly there's a face that showed itself from the top of the ladder. And the face was shining, and this, like, he's never seen a face like that. And that person told him, climb, but hold on. Climb again, just hold on, that's all. That was a dream. And sometimes I'm also understood that this is not, a simple dream. And sometime later, he has his good friend Naftali told him that a new Rebbe has settled in this area, the area of Breslov. He is a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he's different. He's different from all the other. And they said, "Let's go." And I'm sorry, it wasn't Naftali. There was another one of their friends, and he told them about it. And they knew him. He's one of their friends, and they saw that he's davening in a way he has never davened like this before. With tremendous islahavas, with tremendous bren, whatever it is. And he told them, this young Rebbe, whatever. B'kitzur, Reb Nosson got all fired up, and he and his friend Naftali decided that they're going to check out this new Rebbe, that young Rebbe that settled in their area. And when Reb Nosson came to the room, when he entered, and he saw Rabbeinu for the first time, he was stunned, because he saw that face. He knew that face. That was the face that he saw in his dream. And lo and behold, Rabbeinu turns to him and gives him a shalom aleichem and tells him, "We already know each other for a while, don't we?" And Reb Nosson realized that this is it. This is where he's going. His prayers will be answered. This is where he's going to get what he wants. From the other side of the map, as it were, before Reb Nosson came to Breslov, Rabbeinu spoke for a long time about this very special neshama that lived in this area. Rabbeinu said that he moved into this area for this particular neshama. It's very much like Rizal said that he came to Tzfas, he came to the world in order to teach Reb Chaim Vital. And he told his people about the greatness of this neshama, how special this neshama was. And this neshama, that through whom not a single word of his teachings will be lost. And the entire future of Klal Yisrael, one might say, is dependent on this neshama. He told his daughter, he says, "What shall I tell you? You see this house? The person with this neshama can take a look at this house, and he can tell you exactly what the length and the height and the width is, not because he's a savant, that he has this talent of being able to know, how is simply als chochma." Basically, somebody said, you'll put him, if he were to come out of his grave today, and you took him to a parking lot of Avis, I don't know, anywhere where there are like hundreds and thousands of cars, and would give him the keys. There's a pair of keys. He would go to the right car and go in and drive it al chochmah alone, not because of any specific, whatever it is, that by understanding a thing from a thing, he'll be able to know exactly those keys, to which car it belongs and how it should be operated. It just came from the 18th century. It's 19th century. To the point that when Reb Nosson actually came, the Rebbe's Talmidim refused to believe that this was the neshama the Rebbe spoke about. because I don't know, they expected, I don't know, somebody like 10 feet tall. I don't know what they expected. But the Rebbe says to one, he says, you want to know who it is I'm talking about? He said, when you'll see him, you'll see that by himself, he has all the self-esteem of mud. So that time it said when he saw Reb Nosson for the first time, he was walking around, and Nosson was walking with rabbinical clothes, with silk clothes. He was the son-in-law of a big Rebbe, and he was himself a Talmid Chacham. And he saw with the silken clothes, he saw that he was by himself like a shtick blot, like a puddle of mud. That's what he held himself. That's what he did. And very quickly, Nosson understood what was going on and who Rabbeinu is. The greatest chokhmah, the greatest chus of Am Yisrael and Reb Nosson is that Reb Nosson realized the greatness of Rabbeinu. I mean, anybody that knew Rabbeinu knew that he was great. Rabbeinu was famous. He was one of the Tzaddikei Ador. But the greatness of Reb Nosson was that he was able to understand that Rabbeinu was something else entirely. It wasn't just that he was one of, or even the greatest of. It has nothing to do with that. Rabbeinu was the fulcrum of Judaism. That Judaism from that moment on is never going to be the same. Though it might take the world another 200 years until the world finally realized, like people are starting to realize today, that Rabbeinu is not just another one, but somebody like whom there has never been before. Like one of the 5 tzaddikim, fulcrums of Yiddishkeit, of Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem Bar Yochai, Rabbeinu Arizal, Rabbeinu Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbeinu Nachman. The greatness of Reb Nosson was the fact that he understood and he believed in Rabbeinu, and that is the thing that enabled him to express Rabbeinu's Torah in a way that will shine until the end of time. We are learning Torah Chaf Aleph, Likutei Moharan. Rabbeinu says that there is, if you recall, that there are 2 modes, intellectual modes of acquiring wisdom. Achor and Kedem, backwards and forwards. The backwards is the natural way of learning things in which you are adding to a knowledge that you had before and now you know more. It's based on something that you knew before. That is natural wisdom. It's based on what preceded it. It's called backwards. And in the brain, in the mind of man, there is an inherent capacity which is dormant to acquire, to receive wisdom through divine flow, a divine influx. It just pours. It's not based on anything that was known before. A classic example for this, of course, is the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu brought the entire Torah down. He got the entire Torah as one piece. And brother, it's not based on any prior knowledge. It's not based on any prior, preamblums or prefaces or preconditions or anything. That's it. And Reb Nosson says that Rabbeinu says that in order to get that, to awaken that capacity to receive the whole Chokhmah in one shot, in one fell swoop, as it were, which then, fires up your heart. You get the Shefa Eloki, you get Diburim that you can speak to Kodesh Baruch Hu. New Diburim, which is Pchinas Ruach HaKodesh. This you are able to get through rectifying the 7 candles of the candelabra, which is your head, which is the mouth and the nose and the ears and the eyes. The Rebbeinu explains that the mouth means refrain from saying anything false. The nose means you should have Yir Shemaim. We already learned the Torah base. Barich Obir Hashem says about Mashiach. Mashiach will be able to smell people true identity and what their inside is. We refer here to the smell. This is what is the thing that the neshama is able to enjoy and not the body. This is the smell. This is why most Shabbos we make besamim, because the neshama is here that leaves us. Mashiach will be able to smell what a person really is and give him directions on what he needs to do to come to his tachlis, to give him the advice of how to lead him to where he needs to get. It says, Baricha b'yis Hashem, he will smell with his Yir Shemaim, he'll be able to smell. So the nose refers to Yir Shemaim. The ears refer to Emunas Chachamim. What's the pshat Emunas Chachamim? What does it mean? What do you believe, that he's a Chacham? What is it to believe? If he learned a lot of Torah, and he wrote Sfarim, and he has a lot of Talmidim, he's a Chacham. What's the pshat? You believe that he's a Chacham? The answer is not that you believe that he's a Chacham. You know that he is. So what does it mean, Emunas Chachamim? What does it mean to believe in Chachamim? Rabbeinu said, what you need to believe is that once you already realize that he is a Chacham Amiti, he's a true sage, that whatever it is that he's saying is filled with secrets. Every single word that he's telling you is filled with secrets, supernal secrets. You have to understand that every single word that he's saying is based on the fact that because he's a tzaddik, because he's a chacham, that means that there's no self involved here. Everything is Hashem Shamayim. Whatever it is that this chacham has is Ratzon Hashem. That's all. He doesn't know anything else. So whatever he says comes from that perspective, from the kind of asagas, the kind of madrigas he was able to get. Every single word that he's saying is filled with secrets. And of course, the eyes, don't look where you're not supposed to look. And Rabbeinu says in this particular Torah, interestingly enough, that when he talks about the ears, that candles which represent the ears, which represent Emunas Chachamim, he brings two psukim. One of them that says, Shma Divrei Chachamim, hear the words of Chachamim. And then he brings another verse that says, Hoichach lachacham, admonish the wise, and he will love you. Admonish the joker, and he will hate you. Is that the only thing that we believe in the Chacham? What, he tells me what I'm doing wrong? That's the only thing that there is. What about all the Torah that he reveals to me? What about all the sorrows that he gives me? What about the answer? The answer is Teichacha is not just what you're doing wrong. Teichacha means that he is showing you the truth. I was just learning with Chavrusa, and he said, we are all walking in a cloud. We have no idea where we're going. Emunas Chachamim is that you attach yourself to a Chacham, fully believing that he is leading you in the right way, and you listen to everything that he's saying. Not following what he's saying is basically like being in a barrel in the middle of the ocean and trying to navigate according to the look of the fish around you. The most essential nakuda of proving to yourself where you are and where you're going and what should you do and what you should stay away from and what you should get to, this is all getting into the definition of admonishment. In Hebrew, it's called Hocheach Tochiach Es Amitecha. So it's a reproach, but in Hebrew it comes from the word Hoichocha. Hoichocha means proof. When we say they have in alcohol, they have proof, right? They in gold they have proof, in silver they have proof. What is the proof? And proof means what is the true content here. To bring a proof means to reveal the truth, to reveal that which is not evident to the eye. So over here, the most important of all qualities is the midas emunah. How much do you believe in the Chacham? Reb Nosson's, besides his incredible genius, the previous level I've ever said that Nosson was the brain of the Hasidus. People tend to think, Chabad is a brainy Hasidus. It says Reb Nosson is the brain of the entire Hasidus. Rabbeinu actually compared him to the Baal HaTanya, and he said he was a bigger innovator than the Baal HaTanya, even though it's hard to understand. But nevertheless, with all his originality, with all his unwavering devotion, with all his clear insight, with all his kedusha, with all his immense tzidkis, way beyond everything else, was the fact that Reb Nosson, I remember Reb Luzakenik Yahrtzeit told this to me many, many years ago. And Reb Nosson had a deep, deep, deep emunah in Rabbeinu. Reb Nosson wasn't the only Talmud of Rabbeinu that wrote, wasn't the only great Talmud of Rabbeinu, and he wasn't the only one who wrote Sfarim, that were based on Rabbeinu's Torahs. Rabbeinu had Reb Shmuel Isaac, that after Rabbeinu passed away, he gave him the job to deal with the neshamas of the departed. And whenever unser Leid, Rabbeinu had a doubt of what would Rabbeinu prefer in a specific situation, they would send Reb Shmuel Isaac to the Tzion, Rabbeinu's Tzion, and ask him to ask Rabbeinu and tell him what he said. In fact, there was such an issue that was raised when Reb Naftali and Reb Nosson were contemplating making a shidduch with their children. So they sent Reb Shmuel Isaac to Rabbeinu to find out what did Rabbeinu say about this. And he came back saying, when he says, I have two friends, they should also be enemies. In other words, don't make the shidduch. Shmuel Isaac is a Talmud that he, Ma'ariv was an hour, took an hour by him. Every Rosh Hashanah, he had his own Talmidim, and his Talmidim would get him, a new talis, cotton. And his davening Rosh Hashanah was so fire that the talis cotton that he would wear would disintegrate from the heat of his body. He was davening a weekday Ma'ariv for an hour. An hour. Reb Nosson himself said about Shmuel Isaac that Rabbeinu, he says, he said by himself, he said, if I know that I'm going to say Kriyat Shema today with the same kind of excitement and illumination that I said yesterday, I'd rather they cut my head off. I don't want to be in this world. There's another Maisa with one of his Talmidim that, he lived about, 100, 200 miles from Shmuel Isaac. And in the middle of the winter, on Motzei Shabbos, Shabbos goes out, there's a knock on the door, and he opens the door, and there's his Rebbe, Shmuel Isaac, who lives 100 miles away. And he tells him, to take a bottle of wine and Avdallah candle and some and follow him. And he takes it, and they walk in the snow, and they go outside the cemetery, the local cemetery. And he lights up the candle, and Shmuel Isaac was still before Avdallah. He light up the candle, and he holds the cup, and he makes Avdallah. And a voice thundered from the cemetery and said, Amen, to the brachas. His student practically fainted. This was of Shmuel Isaac. Shmuel Isaac also wrote Sfarim. Reb Naftali was Reb Nosson's friend, the great Talmud of Rabbeinu, Reb Naftali. That Rabbeinu says, nobody knows who I am except Rabbi Nosson and Naftali a little bit. Naftali knows who I am a little bit. They are the ones who rode Rabbeinu in the wagon on the way to Uman, and he gave them the Megillah Storim, the hidden scroll of everything that will happen until Mashiach will come, Ezrat Hashem. They all wrote Sfarim, they all wrote books. Yet none of these Sfarim have, are around. Every single Sefer in Breslov every single thing that made it throughout the generation was written or based on that which was written by Reb Nosson. What's the difference between the holy manuscripts that were put together by these huge tzaddikim and Reb Nosson? That Reb Nosson's writings remain to this day. Everything we have from Rabbeinu is from Reb Nosson. If you see Likutei Halachos, it starts with Rabbeinu's Torah, a synopsis of Rabbeinu's Torah, and it goes from there. Reb Nosson said he came to Rabbeinu, and Rabbeinu said that when Reb Nosson came to him, Reb Nosson was already totally versed in the 7 wisdoms, which means math, and what you can see in some Likutei Halachos, there's very intricate mathematical computations and astronomy and whatever. That he was versed with all of the 7 wisdoms. He was an unbelievable Talmid Chacham. He was only 22 years old when he came to Rabbeinu. He was already one of Tzaddikei Ador. Rabbi Nosson said he took his entire Chochmah and put it aside. Rabbeinu told him a shtickle seichel, he knows Aleph. Told him another shtickle seichel, he knows Beis. I think this is akin to Rabbi Avo, if I'm not mistaken, that said when he came from Babylon to Eretz Yisrael, he fasted 100 days to forget all the Torah that he learned in Babylon in order to be able to learn the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. Which means he didn't want anything that he knew before to color whatever it is that he is learning. He wanted to be totally brand new. Reb Nosson did not want anything that he knew from before to color what he understood from Rabbeinu. Rabbeinu had a Yudel who was a Rebbe before he came to Rabbeinu. He was a Rebbe. He himself was a Rebbe. And Adam was a Tirovetz Magid. Tirovetz Magid was the Talmud of the Magid of Mizrich. He was a bosom friend of Reb Nachman of Chernobyl. The Baal Tanya took a skama from him for the Siddur Baal Tanya with all the halachas. He took a skama from him. Rabbeinu was 21-year-old when the Tirovetz Magid was over 80. And he became a Talmud of Rabbeinu. And one night he said, when Rabbeinu was saying Torah in Rosh Hashanah, and he heard the Torah, and he was there. Now, Tirovetz Magid, Reb Nachman of Chernobyl used to come to him once a year, and he would go to him once a year. They would spend time together. He was one of the Tzaddikei Ador, one of the Rebbes of the generation. You're talking about the Talmidei HaMagid. That includes the Baal Tanya. That includes the Rebbe Melech. That's called the Rebbe Zisha. That's called the Rebbe Yosef from Berditchev. He's one of those. And he saw Rabbeinu, and he said, Rabbeinu said the Torah, and he said he saw that fire is coming out of Rabbeinu's mouth. You're not talking about a little child who has Dimyonis. You're talking about one of Tzaddikei Ador. He saw fire coming out. And he says in Motzei Yom Tov, he sees this young buck, in his early 20s, rushing with a bundle of paper in his hand. And he asked him, what is it do you have? What do you have in your hands? That was Reb Nosson. He says, what do you have in your hands? So Reb Nosson had the Torah that they heard from Rabbeinu, Nosson memorized it, and Motzei Yom Tov he wrote it down, and he was rushing to Rabbeinu to show it to him. The Yahrtzeit Maggid said he took those papers and he looked at them, and he said, and I saw as this young man took the fire and put it on paper. The fire was on the paper. In other words, it was lossless recording. Nothing got lost in the translation. Because Reb Nosson cleansed himself totally from anything that, any opinion, anything that he knew from before. So that what he gets from Rabbeinu will not be colored. Rabbeinu says Aleph, it's an Aleph. He says Beis, it's a Beis. He says Gimel, it's a Gimel. And how appropriate it is, when he actually came to this last day of his life, and he said, here goes Ezra Sefer. Because, Asar B'Tevis is the Yahrtzeit of Ezra Sefer. Reb Nosson is the Ezra Sefer of our generation. Without him, we wouldn't have anything. It's said that the only tiniest tzibur that if it would have happened on Shabbos, we would fast that tiniest, is Tzom Asar B'Tevis. It says about Yom Kippurim Kayom Hazeh. It says about the Asar B'Tevis Kayom Hazeh. So which means that it's the same level as Yom Kippur's. If it would have, it never happens. It never falls on Shabbos. If it would have, we would fast it. So says the Abu Dhram, Rabbi David Abu Dhram. He's one of the latest Rishonim. And the Chassam Sofer explains why is he saying that? What is so significant about Asar B'Tevis? He says because Asar B'Tevis, he says there is a Yom Adin, a judgment day for people, which is Rosh Hashanah. There's for the plants, which is Tu B'Shvat, and there is for the water, and there is for for various things, and for the wheat and whatever it is. And there is one day a year which is the judgment day for Beis HaMikdash. And that's Asar B'Tevis. Asar B'Tevis is commemorating when Nebuchadnezzar Yimach Shemai first came to Yerushalayim. That's the beginning of the destruction of the temple. And we hold Halacha in every place that the beginning, the Aschola Chamirlan, that the most important point in anything is the beginning. That's the reason why we are fasting on Tisha B'Av and not on Yud B'Av, which is actually when the main burning of Beis HaMikdash took place on the 10th of Av. But that's not when we're fasting. We're fasting on Tisha B'Av when it started to burn. Asar B'Tevis is the beginning of the burning of the Beis HaMikdash, the beginning of the destruction. Asar B'Tevis is the day of judgment for the Beis HaMikdash. But judgment has two facets. The very same way that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it began in Asar B'Tevis. The building of Beis HaMikdash also begins in Asar B'Tevis. Reb Nosson of Breslov is the beginning of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Nothing less than that. whatever it is that he did, whatever it is that he still does, will eventually express itself in the building of Beis Hamikdash. As Nosson says, we're all waiting for Mashiach. Mashiach will rectify the entire world. But he says, but my personal Mashiach already came. The number one attribute which enabled Reb Nosson to be the most influential Moitze Lapal, the one that project manager of the Geula, is the profundity of his belief in the greatness of Rabbeinu. That is the thing that made everything possible. There are 6 Tainus Tzibur a year. They say male, female, black and white, long and short. That's your simon. Male and female is Tzom Gedalia is the male, and Tainus Esther is the female. The black Tainus is Tisha B'Av. The white Tainus is Yom Kippur. The longest Tainus is, of course, Shivasa B'Tammuz. That's the longest one in hours, because Tammuz is the longest day. The shortest Tainus is Asar B'Teves. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, let's just go over quickly about what the halachas of this unusual Asar B'Teves that happens on Friday. And Shachris is Tefillah and Kriyas Torah like any Asar B'Teves. Washing, there's no reason. This is all the psakim of Arav Vosner, Zechat Tzaddik Livracha. It says, of course, you wash yourself for Shabbos, and of course, you can cut your nails. Now, if you're cooking for Shabbos and you need to taste the food to see if it's salty enough or not, you're allowed to put it in your mouth and spit it out, not swallow it. In Mincha, we sing V'yachal. We're reading in the Torah, we're saying V'yachal, but there's no Nefilas Apayim. And this is the only Tainus, that we actually, because it's Tainus Tzibur, we finish it, we go into Shabbos fasting. Lemaisa, some Hasidim noyeg not to make Kiddush between 6 and 7 o'clock in the evening, because that is a time period where the mazel of Madim, of Mars, which is Fichas Domen, this is in this particular Friday, there is no need, to wait. You finish davening, you go home, and you make Kiddush. The halacha is also, if some people, they can't just, break a fast and sit down and eat a Suda. They need to have a cup of coffee with some zoynus, whatever it is. So the halacha is that you can, women fasting is the same as any other trainers. It's like if they had a reason not to fast. By the way, Shavasa, Asar B'Teves is like any other, even though, Mitzvah is Potter. So they said that I once heard from a friend that says that women is always Potter from Tainus. He says either she's pregnant or she's breastfeeding, If she's neither, then she must be sick. Okay, so whatever. So she's always potter. Anyhow, because it's a little joke. Anyhow, be that as it may, you come home, as is you can make kiddush. You need to make kiddush and drink a cup of coffee. You need to shtickle mazaynis. You can do that. La'alochen, it says lemaisa. You should be machmir to drink a whole revius besides the kiddush. But you can make a kiddush on mezainis if this is what you need to do. Of course, it is preferable just to go ahead and do kiddush and sit and have a suda, B'ezrat Hashem. There's really nothing that can be said about the greatness of Reb Nosson. It's just not possible to put this into words. I'm not even talking about Rabbeinu. I'm talking about Reb Nosson. Gadol shebegdolim. Gadol shebegdolim. On par with the greatest tzaddikim of his generation. Reb Levi Sobraditchev, the Baal HaTanya, the Reb Zisha, the Reb Melech. He was in the same league. And he understood that his role is that of the water carrier of Rabbeinu, who is the fulcrum, as we said before, the fulcrum of Yiddishkeit. The B'ezrat Hashem will lead us all to Mashiach. So, Schus Yagen Aleinu B'ezrat Hashem. I want to wish everybody and myself an easy fast, meaningful Sarah B'Tevis. B'ezrat Hashem, the Schus of Reb Nosson will hold by us all. Throughout whatever it is that we need to go through. We have to see all our children, B'ezrat Hashem, be tzadikei emes lamita in the way of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And Olavai, B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should open up the heavens of Likutei Halachos, the Likutei Tfilos, and we should be able to dive into them and actually experience them firsthand, because this is Gan Eden in this world. I want to apologize to everybody for taking a little bit longer tonight. But Hashem, thank you so very much. Hashem, I will see you all on Motzei Shabbos in Sichas Haran. The Sichas Haran of last week is still, with all its multitude, is still banging around in my head. We'll see if we'll